Hello and welcome to Film Slam Stream's post-film conversation for EcoHack. My name is Eric Siler, and I'm an instructor of film, media arts, communications, as well as moderator for this conversation. We are very pleased to be joined by one of the co-directors of EcoHack, Josh Izenberg. Josh is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, cinematographer, and producer. He has worked with such well-known commercial clients such as Nokia and Audi. He has filmed in many places, including jungles, deserts, as you saw in the film, hospitals, villages, and also in other places as well too. Hello, Josh, and welcome.
Hi, Eric. Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you. This is a really interesting and educational film, EcoHack, and I learned something. I hope our viewers learned something as well too. What did you learn from this film? I just want to start out that way. Did you know about, the tortoises and the ravens?
No, I didn't know. Well, I knew about tortoises and ravens individually, but I had no idea that ravens pose such a serious problem for tortoises. So that was totally new to me. I don't think I knew that much about ravens or appreciated how intelligent they were. And I didn't, I thought tortoises were cool, but I don't think I had a deep appreciation for them either. And I think just watching Tim's love and passion for these animals was really eye-opening for me. And I kind of started seeing tortoises in a new light too. These creatures that have sort of like managed to survive. I mean, it is really harsh conditions out there in the Mojave Desert, and to see an animal that has like not only survived but has thrived there for millennia is just amazing. So yeah, I learned a lot. That's just the tip of the iceberg there.
Absolutely. And I appreciated what you've brought to us. Tim, fascinating subject. Did you know Tim personally, or if not, how did you get to know him?
So my co-director Brett and I have an editor we work with named Key Haywood, who is from this small town in rural Alaska where Tim is from. And Key knew Tim, and he knew that Brett and I were looking for documentary ideas, as we always are. And he started telling us about this guy Tim he knew from his hometown, who was a biologist who lived in the Mojave and was shooting lasers and using fake exploding tortoise shells to try to fend off ravens. And we were just like, wow, this guy sounds fascinating. This project sounds amazing. And we had Key connect us with Tim, met Tim, had breakfast with him, and heard his spiel about everything he was doing and his story. And we pitched him on making a film, and he was receptive.
So were you the first people to approach Tim? Because what has done, I'm sure there might have been news articles or news stories about him. Were you the first ones to approach him?
I think we were the first documentary filmmakers to approach him. He had been featured in Audubon magazine, which is, for those who don't know, it's like a huge magazine in the wild bird community and just wildlife in general. He had been, I think he'd even maybe been in Vice News. So he certainly had been covered by like print journalism to some degree. But, we were the first filmmakers, but I don't think we're going to be the last. I mean, even after we finished filming with Tim, he was approached by National Geographic, and he appeared in an episode of this film called, a series called The Unlikely Burger with Christian Cooper, a birder from Central Park. So Christian would go around and find different people who are engaging with birds in interesting ways. So, I think you're going to see Tim in other places on television and elsewhere, probably going forward.
I'm sure we will. And one thing I enjoyed about Tim and what you displayed about him was that uh, he wasn't out to harm any of the animals at all. He was just showing how to outsmart the ravens in that sense. And I thought that was captured well. And I'm sure that resonated with you as well in making this film.
Yeah, we thought, I mean, you'd think, okay, well, why not just kill the ravens if they're such an invasive problem? Well, there's multiple reasons why you don't do that. Some of them are legal, and there's rules and regulations about that, but some of them are ethical. I mean, Tim does not dislike ravens. I think he has a respect for ravens, and he's interested in them as living beings. He just doesn't want them in the Mojave doing what they're doing with the tortoises. Now, ravens can survive anywhere, so there's probably better places for them to be. And they're smart enough that if they sort of ultimately discover that there's better ways to get a meal than by harassing a tortoise and then maybe getting blasted with a laser, they'll go elsewhere, and they have plenty of other opportunities. So what's kind of interesting about what Tim's doing is it's ultimately a win-win. I mean, the ravens can survive and make their own way, and then the tortoises will also have space to hopefully continue to exist in the desert. So I really did like that about what Tim is doing.
Absolutely. And Tim was just, I'm sure he was just a wonderful subject to interview. He's had some really good lines in there. And I know one thing he stated was about how the intelligence of the ravens. He talked about one point, if one raven panics, it's like the human effect. One raven flies away, everyone starts to panic as well too, just like human beings as well too.
Oh,
So
for sure, yeah. And you know, he can use that actually how the raven's intelligence was actually sort of a useful tool for him in doing the work that he's doing, because what's cool about the ravens is like you don't have to teach every raven that you know, a tortoise might explode if you try to eat it, or you might get blasted with a laser. You only have to teach enough of them that then they can start teaching each other. Because it's similar with people. You know, you wouldn't have to, if you wanted to change human behavior, you really only have to like reach a few key influencers, right? Like we know that from our own society, and then we sort of trickle down and we'll spread that information ourselves. So ravens are similar, and it sort of makes Tim's job a little bit easier, because there's no way he could then, you know, individually teach every raven not to eat tortoises. But if he teaches a small amount, and they can sort of teach their own offspring and so forth, you make a big impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the production itself. I know you started in February 2019 and went through February 22 because of the pandemic and so forth. You spent about 10 to 12 days filming. Tell us a little bit about that filming experience and working with Tim.
Sure. I mean, Tim's the perfect documentary subject because he's funny, he's smart, he's very candid. Sometimes with people, I've worked with a lot of different kinds of people, you have to really push them to sort of be their authentic selves on camera. But Tim had no problem with that. He was immediately just like giving us just amazing sound bites as soon as we were rolling the camera. So we had tons of material to work with. We sat down, we obviously did a long interview with Tim, but a lot of what we were doing was walking around in the desert in the Mojave with our gear on our backs, looking for tortoises, looking for ravens, and seeing what we could see. And we weren't guaranteed to find any tortoises. I mean, there's not a lot of them out there, as you sort of learn in the film. So we got really lucky. We found, we went out with Tim and some of his researchers he was working with, and found in one day 2 adult tortoises, which I think was just a huge stroke of luck for them, but also for us, because then we had an opportunity to film tortoises. And Tim is very, very good at finding them. I mean, they're not easy to find out there, and he knows how to find them. And then we spent a lot of time with him and Frank as they were going out and experimenting with the lasers and the tortoise, the exploding tortoise, fake tortoises. So just a lot of kind of wandering around out in the Mojave area, which is a huge expanse too. That's like, I mean, it's just a big area. So there's a lot of driving. We'd sort of go do something somewhere in the desert and then drive an hour and a half to the next spot we had to get to. And a lot of like really dicey 2-track roads back in the desert too. We were just hoping we didn't get stuck in the sand.
Exactly. So it's very challenging to film in the desert. We didn't really get a good sense of the conditions, but can you tell us about the conditions there? Was it extremely hot during the day and cold at night? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we were filming a lot in the spring and the fall, which is the best time to find tortoises. So for those, I think, who haven't spent time in at least the Mojave Desert in Eastern California, Southeastern California, it's cold. It's windy. It's very, very windy. I mean, winds can be blowing at 40, 50 miles an hour. So it's, it's not cold like, Cleveland winter cold, but it's chilly. It's, in the 40s. And so, that presented various technical issues. I mean, we had getting good audio when it's that windy is hard. So we had some specialized equipment to be able to get, audio hear Tim talking without getting a constant wind noise, which is, always a challenge when filming outdoors. Very dry. Have to always have a lot of water with you. But it's barren, but it's sort of beautiful. And as Tim sort of shows us in the film, I mean, as you get to know it and you get to understand the desert, you start seeing all these plants and small animals, and it's just like, wow, I can't believe all these things are living out here. It's really cool. I like it. I really enjoy my time out there.
In terms of, did you spend the night in the desert? And so what type of accommodations did you have?
We spent, we would get a motel, the film crew. So we would like, go luxury, not a luxury motel, cheap motel, but luxury compared to Tim, who is sleeping in the desert floor. I mean, when he's doing his work, and we filmed him waking up in the morning, but we saw it too. He just pulls his car off to the side of some small desert road, throws a big, he's got like a mat he puts on the ground, gets in a sleeping bag and just lies down and sleeps under the stars. And that's what he does every night. Wakes up, has coffee. So we'd just go meet, we'd communicate with Tim and make a plan. We'd say, okay, we're going to meet you here at 7 in the morning. We go to our hotel or a motel, drive back out in the desert, and we'd find him waking up, getting off of his mat, having his coffee, and then we'd sort of do whatever we had to do that day.
I'm sure Tim is thinking these city people.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, no, I think he's out in the desert 5 months out of the year, and he has been for the last 30 years. So it's really his home.
Exactly. And working with this film, you were a co-director and your working partner, Brett. Can you explain it to our audience about the roles that each of you took on in making this film?
Sure. Yeah. And we've done this with a few different projects. When I co-direct with Brett Marty, who I work with a lot, what we often do is we usually hire a cinematographer, but we'll do the audio. So, somebody has to do the audio, which is a complicated job in and of itself. Somebody has to be asking questions of the film subject and talking to them or whoever else is on camera at any given moment. Somebody has to be planning what we're going to do next. So maybe we're on the desert looking for tortoises, but we're also thinking, okay, when we're done with this at noon, we get lunch, then we have time to go see some of the technology, or what's the next thing. So there's a lot of different things to do. And I think Brett and I, we both do a little bit of everything. And it's very nice to have another person to sort of share those tasks with. So oftentimes maybe I would be doing the audio. I'd have the audio gear and be recording audio, and Brett would be talking to Tim, and I'm listening to make sure the audio sounds good. And then if Brett forgot some questions or didn't, I thought of some stuff that I thought, we should ask Tim, I'd kind of jump in at the end, and then we'd have a conversation about what to do next and plan that out. And so, so on and so forth for the duration of the film.
Oh, great. And how did you and Brett get to know each other?
Oh, we had a mutual friend who was a musician and wanted to make a music video for a track of his back in, I think, like 2008. I just moved out to the Bay Area, and he connected us and said, hey, you guys both are into filmmaking. Why don't you work together and help me with this music video thing? And we did that, and we found we liked working together, and we went from there. We've done a number of projects together at this point and been all over the place.
And it certainly showed in this documentary. And working with as a co-director, can you explain to us times in which the two of you did not agree on something, and how did that get resolved?
Well, I think it happens a lot. And usually when we don't agree, we communicate a lot. We'll talk it out. Each person makes their case. If we have a creative disagreement, here's my opinion. Here's why I think we should do it this way. Okay, wait, here's my opinion. And sometimes you can convince the other person, and then that's great. Other times, usually there's a third party. So sometimes there's a cinematographer. If we're editing, there's an editor. And then it often is, if one of us has a certain feeling about something and the editor agrees, then it's, that's the direction in which we go. So, and I think we've gotten pretty good at, I think, there's always little things that happen in disagreements, but I think we've learned how to disagree, and we've learned how to sort of find a creative way forward. And what's nice about it is that usually in the end, we wind up with a better product. And I think so. I think I've learned that, sometimes I'll disagree with Brett, but Brett and the editor will have some sort of feeling about it. We'll go in that direction. And later I generally come around. I'm like, you know what, they were right. That was the way to go. So I think we've just, as we wind up with films that we're happy with, I think we've just sort of proven out that we can figure out our differences, and it's for the better.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you said that. Made that point too. It's for the betterment of the film. It's not about egos and so forth. And it's important for
Yeah.
our students to know that too, that are watching that it's a collaborative process.
The film is such a collaborative process for anyone who's interested in filmmaking. Yeah, that's what's great about it. A lot of people work together. Oftentimes a great idea would come from somebody who you wouldn't expect it. I mean, it might be the cinematographer might have an idea about something we could go film next, or something we could even a question we could ask Tim has nothing to do with cinematography. So we generally would just say, hey, if anyone has any ideas to share or something we might include in the film, just like let us know. And so everybody sort of, even Tim and Frank who are in the film were in some ways part of the filmmaking process too. It's not just about them. They were also co-creators of the film, and we'd share ideas with them and they'd share ideas with us. So the whole thing is just a big collaboration, and for me that's the most fun way to do it.
Can you share with us something in this film in which the two of you had to maybe didn't agree upon and the outcome, something specifically from this film?
Oh man, I'm not sure I can come up with something. They're very minute things, and I often forget
Okay.
about them pretty quickly. So it could be a camera angle, it could be whether or not we need to interview this extra person or not. I mean, just little creative
Okay.
choices like that.
But
So
nothing major.
no,
Okay.
not with this one. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But in terms of major, every film there's footage that doesn't get included or sound bites that didn't get included. Can you tell us something about this film that wasn't included, that if you had the time that you would have included?
Yeah, I mean, Tim does a lot of different stuff out there. He has a lot of different technology out there in the desert, and there's a lot of stuff. And we have so many sequences that aren't in the film. I mean, Tim walks around under these telephone poles, and he can see from the patterns of sticks that have fallen down beneath the telephone poles out in the desert, whether or not there's ravens making nests above, because they have a certain way of dropping sticks. And so he's working on this satellite technology that can go up and use AI and satellite technology to sort of identify where ravens might be based on these patterns of sticks out there in the desert. So it can sort of see a bunch of what would look to us like just a bunch of, there's lots of sticks out in the desert and rocks and stuff like that. But he's working on this thing that can look at it and say, okay, there's probably ravens here, here, and here. So we had a whole, we spent probably 2 or 3 hours just filming out in the desert, Tim showing us these stick patterns and talking about that. And like, that's not in the film. And so on. There's probably, 3 or 4 other sequences where we sort of discuss a certain kind of technology that Tim's working on. And we just, in the end of the day, we were like, it's sort of making the film too slow, or so we just sort of, you can spend a lot of time working on something and it can be a great sequence, but if it doesn't sort of serve the general story or make the film better, then sometimes you'll leave it out in the end. And those are hard decisions to make.
Absolutely. I know we're out of time, but I just want to ask you this, the title Eco Hack, is that something you, Tim, Frank, Brett came up with, or who came up with that title?
Actually, another production company called Spine Films, a long time ago, we pitched them on an idea. We discussed an idea of doing a series about scientists like Tim who were intervening, using technology to intervene and try to save species. And they were great. We weren't able to pursue the idea with Spine, but they were like, oh, these people are they're eco hacking. That's what they're doing, and we're like, oh, that's interesting. That's a cool phrase, and we sort of didn't do anything with it for a while, and then eventually when this film came around, we were like, eco hack with an exclamation point. It's catchy. It sort of catches your eye. It's easy to remember, and it's sort of like a perfect phrase for what Tim is doing. So I think it would be cool if that phrase became a phrase that we just use in the language to describe, any kind of work in the same vein as what Tim is up to. So that's our hope, is it just sort of joins the, the scientific lexicon. You say, okay, I'm going to go do an eco hack on behalf of jaguars that are threatened in Mexico or whatever the situation is.
Well, great. Real quick, are you and Brett working on something now? If so, what is it, and when can we expect to see it?
Sure. Yeah. We have a film that we're finishing up about a guy who's down in San Diego. Well, a whole team of people. It's not just one individual who built a sort of fake city that looks like it's from the 1950s. And it's for people who have Alzheimer's and dementia who can't necessarily remember what they had for breakfast, but oftentimes for various reasons can remember what life was like 30, 40, 50 years ago. So it's about using this sort of imaginary city in a way to try to reconnect people with these lost memories. So we've been working on that for quite a while. Right now it's called Remember When, but it's still a working title and we're still wrapping the film up. So that's sort of the main thing we're finishing up. And then we have some various ideas in the works. We're also working on a documentary about another scientist who's trying to save the planet from global warming by genetically engineering these plants that have super deep root structures that can actually pull carbon out of the air and put it back into the soil. So that's another thing we're doing right now. So, and we'll see what else.
Wow, both of those projects sound fascinating. I want to watch them right now.
Yeah, I'll hope to be able to share them with the next couple of years. So
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Josh Izenberg, co-director of EcoHack. I wish you and Brett all the best in your future filmmaking. Thank you.
yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks so much for having me, and I hope you enjoyed the film.
You did. You're welcome. And thank you to our audience for joining us for this important and invigorating conversation. For more information about upcoming film festivals, please visit clevelandfilm.org. I'm Eric Siler. Thank you.